Okay, so now we've done our inner voice and we want to move on to doing something that's a little bit more directly involved with metabolism and physical health. And so now we're going to do what's called the vital scan. This is going to require that the client has on their headset. As you can see in your pamphlet, the headset is not placed on the ear directly, but the little round area of the headset's put in front of the ear on the cheekbone. The sort of raised circular area goes over the top of the ear, and the U-shaped area goes behind the head. Now we're going to go into the Vital Scan software here. Again, we have John Doe is the client, Jeffrey Essen is the technician. So we're just going to click on the scan button right away. Now, we're really not looking necessarily to do much other than do an original scan. This is our gathering of information. To give you a reference as to the old version of the AO scan, that measured just over 1,000 things. It took an hour and a half to do a complete scan. This is doing well over 3,000 items, over 50,000 data points. And as it's going through here, we're measuring considerably more items. And as you can see, it's actually going pretty quick. Usually around a minute is what it takes to get us done and to that point of having our initial baseline set of scores. So this is going through all the different categories: blood values, chakras, gastrointestinal function, meridians, nutritional analysis, physical functions, and toxicities. Each one of these things can be explained to the client as output of frequency into the nervous system, the brain, through the headset, which then gives us our feedback. In other words, the bounce back, as if it were radar bouncing back at us to any of these frequencies going in, gives us a status of how that frequency exists in the body. Now, we want to do a frequency optimization right away. We don't want to necessarily work with the numbers from the original scan. We want to work with the numbers that were derived from a corrected scan. Again, explaining this to the clientele, you can say that the original scan may have had some false positives. It may have had things in the body that were vibrational or information challenges. In other words, if the nervous system wasn't communicating properly, if the meridian system wasn't communicating properly, we may have gotten a signal in our original set of scores that showed an imbalance. But in that case, that wouldn't necessarily be an imbalance that would be a solid imbalance, and it's easily correctable. What the frequencies are currently doing is scanning through all the values that we had gotten in our original scan. And those are then being broadcast the opposite, or an inverted signal. In other words, if you have a -5 in your original scan, the software then outputs a +5. Well, we know that a -5 and a +5 cancel each other out to 0. And that's the hope of this part of the process, is that with the frequency optimization, we're looking to cancel out any informational problems in the body, any miscommunication. Miscommunication can lead to disease very directly. And so we want to be able to say is that what we've done here is that we've taken anything that could potentially have been just an anomaly, something that's correctable, something that is informational, and we've been able to correct that, only for the idea that then when we see what's left over at the end is going to be something that's probably on the more physical, chemical, biological, or metabolic side. That we're going to have something that's a little more tangible when it comes to what's left over after the results are done. All right, so here is our corrected report. Now, one thing about this is that this is rather hard to read in its format here on the screen. So one of the things we want to do right away is go create PDF. Now what's happening here is it's taking all of the 7 sections that we've just measured, creating a separate PDF file of that report that we saw on the screen. The reason we want to do this is now we're going to be able to be able to email them better, but we can also manipulate them, put them full on the screen, zoom in, zoom out, scroll through, and have an easier time just in review of them. So you can see that down here on the bottom of the screen, we have our vitals, and we open it up, and where is John Doe? There's John Doe, and we worked with him today. Now, then we go to VitalScan PDF history. We open that, and here's all the scans that we did today. So now when we open this up, we're going to get a much better view, much more manipulatable. We can even pop in on it like that. You can see here, here's John Doe, technician name, the scan date and time. Now, as we go through here, you can see that this is the original scan. This is the uncorrected scan prior to the frequency optimization. These three columns are the corrected scan. This is the column set that we want to pay attention to. So in all of these, all of them are in the normal or balanced range. Our first one that shows up as a little bit low, total iron binding capacity. All of those, that particular score is rather low. It was in the first time, it's also in the second time. So this might be something that's more physical or chemical in the body. In our CBC panel, though, we had in our original scan, neutrophils seemed like they might be a little bit on the high side, perhaps indicative of a bacterial infection. But in the corrected scan, that was just an informational problem of the body, and now that's corrected. So you can see how there's a difference between those that are consistent in their pattern and those that are corrected in the second run through. We have our fatty acids. John Doe could be doing better here. He's got some alpha-linoleic that's low, omega-3s that are low. DHA is rather on the high side, but we're not going to have too much DHA, but this is usually talking about ratios. Okay, so there's our review of the blood pattern. Now we can hit the minus button here. We go back to our chakras. In the chakra set, in our original run through, the throat chakra was off and is still off. So this is something that's probably relative to the throat chakra being congested or having a problem due to something that's on the physical side. We just keep on minus and go to the next one. Gastrointestinal function. Zoom in on this a little bit. Small intestine peristalsis is low. In other words, small intestine is not muscularly pushing and massaging the food around enough. Inflammation seems good. In our insulin resistance, we originally had a free fatty acids as low, but the corrected scan now shows good. We have our A1C a little on the high side. John Doe just went through the Christmas season, maybe a little too much on the sweets, okay? But the rest of it's all good. In our meridians, again, you can see why it's beneficial to zoom. These are rather hard to read. In the original one, the governing vessel was off. The rest of them were balanced. And the second one, that was an informational problem. Governing vessel literally is about communication up of all the different meridians collecting in the spine, moving up to the brain. That's now correct. So for nutritional analysis, we come in here. Notice that there is no such thing as high, just normal or deficient. Here we have little deficient in serine, one of the amino acids. You go to our digestive enzymes, those look good. Our macro minerals look good. Micro minerals look good. Vitamins and enzymes look good. So John must be taking all kinds of really good quality nutrients. Now, in this section right here, it's important to note there's the MTHFR, both manifestations of that potential gene malproduction. Now, this as a blood test would take you, anywhere between a $35 add-on to a more expensive test, all the way up to testing just for this by itself as a $150 test. This is something that we understand that methylation is now something that we're recognizing as a very important factor as to many people's health. Many autoimmune and other metabolic disorders are due to lack of proper methylation. Now, this doesn't necessarily say whether or not you're genetically off, and if you have a genetic malformation, this tells us whether or not from a nutritional standpoint you are properly methylating at the moment. So that's a very important score to look at. We go to our physical functions, and again we're going to zoom in a bit. Come down here, mental clarity is a little on the low side. Bone and muscle condition. The reason why there's so much having to do with bone density and bone growth here is that this was originally designed for the Soviet and Russian space system. So they needed a way to measure the cosmonauts who are in the International Space Station for extended periods of time. And as we know, in space, the people up there lose bone density due to the lack of gravity. They need to look at bones for a great deal of their different factors. Now here again, for someone who's in danger of osteopenia, osteoporosis, these are good factors to take a look at. Our brain and nerve, the optic nerve, a little strained here, perhaps looking at a screen too much. These are the 12 optic nerves, the cranial nerves, and you can look those up. Those are all different parts of how the brain comes directly into the head and face. Come down here to the cardio and cerebral vascular, the coronary artery elasticity is a little on the low side. In other words, this is maybe a little bit of a hardening of the arteries, but the rest of it looks good. Collagen indexes are good. The endocrine system here and here all look good. And then we have dark circles under the eyes. So you can see just as you scan through these things, you can quickly eliminate it down to a very few things. Norepinephrine, a little on the low side. Immune system is looking good. Kidney function, cystatin C is a little on the low side. Liver gallbladder looks good. Lung looks good. Now, male reproductive system, sperm count low, sperm motility rate low, sperm motility. For men over a certain age or boys under a certain age, we don't pay attention to these. These can be relative to the overall testosterone production, but does that correspond with anything else? Skin index is low. Also, by the way, these things are reactive to electromagnetic pollution as well, especially for those men who put a phone in their pocket in their pants. And this one, thyroid function, anti-thyroglobulin antibody. In other words, this is relative to an autoimmune attack on the thyroid gland itself. Again, don't take any of these as hard fact. You want to take a look at these and say, could this be a very temporary condition? We're going to probably end up getting more thyroid scores in as the software gets updated. Toxicities, in terms of what kind of toxin somebody has. Now, these first ones are more allergens, and so oftentimes you'll get a lot of pollens. That's probably not as important right now in the wintertime as it might be during certain times of the year. We start getting into household items, and then we get into foods. This is certainly not a complete list of foods. This is only just a few of the more common ones. Eggs show up, lamb shows up. None of the nuts and seeds and spices. So and these are all based on categories by alphabetical order. So they're just in there for that way. For bacteria, not much, nothing much, nothing much. Now we get down to fungus. There's a Tinea corporus. That's just a little bit of a fungus probably on the skin. And we get down here to toxins, paint, smoke, stress hormones, and tobacco nicotine. I've seen tobacco nicotine show up in people who've never ever smoked in their life, but may have been around secondhand smokers at some point in their life. And smoke, we did have the fire season here in the Western US, and people were being affected by that as well and have breathed that in, and it doesn't necessarily get out. Paint can include also different kinds of varnishes and other volatile chemicals. For heavy metals, cadmium is the one that shows up here. Cadmium is one that is often, again, associated with cigarette smoke as a secondhand or direct, and is typically from that, unless somebody works around tires and rubber a lot. Molds, parasites, there's a few here. Usually with parasites, what I try to do is categorize this into either single cell, protozoic or amoebic parasites, or those things that are larger than microscopic. So as you kind of just go along there's a few parasites. That's probably something where there's enough parasites here to pay attention to them. That'll be one of the things we'd want to write down and say, well, let's go back and look at that when we get to the second part of the test. The viruses don't really seem to be going on here, but I would say look for Epstein-Barr in virtually everyone. All right, so that's our run through of all the different files that we developed as we did the as we did the vitals report. So that's going to all now be emailed by clicking email report to that client. Now the client has all of those things. Now you can encourage them to, find out about these things, perhaps go do a little web searching on some of the names of these things. You don't necessarily have to know what these things are. What we want to do is say, is there a category that as we look at the category heading, for example, as you see the one that's currently displayed, fatty acids could be better. Well, maybe we just want to take a look at fatty acids as a category, but not necessarily have to worry about, is it alpha-linoleic or is it DHA or is it omega-3s? We just want to focus on that one thing. So those are ideas about how we can utilize this report as we run through it. We can look at all the different pages. We can look at toxicities. Well, what's on page 1? Probably nothing to worry about. What's on page 2? Not that much. We might want to suggest that they ease off on the eggs and the lamb. Now we get down here, there wasn't much, not much, but we have a little bit of pollution that seems to be, cadmium, some tobacco, some smoke, some paint. See, these are volatile chemicals. Maybe we want to take a look at the lungs as we get into our next section when we do the comprehensives. So we write down those category headings like human toxins or heavy metals or molds or bacteria or whatever. We write these down on our worksheet just to kind of put us into a mindset of here's where we want to go. So with all that in mind, we, in gastrointestinal function, we want to probably pay attention here to maybe the pancreas and the H1C. So we write pancreas down as something we want to go back to. This is our way of narrowing in on that which we need to go find. This is purely for evaluative process. So we've done our email. We've got it out to the client test. That's how we finish up the AO Scan Vital Scan software. So that's a good review. You will have a resource of a PDF that will give you each and every item on that list, on all those PDFs, every item on every report will be in our PDF that we're going to send you that will have on it an explanation of every one of those things. We've gone onto Wikipedia and other online resources, copied and pasted them into one document. So if you have questions about what any of those things are, or what they may be relative to, you can look it up in that document as you want to go along. I would urge you not to go down too far into that rabbit hole, because you could literally spend hours looking at every one of these things on somebody and sort of lose track of time. I would encourage you to get to the comprehensives as fast as you can, simply because those are going to be something that's a little more applicable. This is where we're going to find out what to do rather than what is the theory. So I hope that worked out well for you as far as understanding that. We should be able to get you on now to the comprehensives, which again is going to get more to where the rubber meets the road. Thank you for listening.